Welcome to Girl Dad, the podcast, the essential podcast for fathers navigating the complex but rewarding journey of raising daughters. I'm your host, Madeline Anderson, and I'm thrilled to bring you honest conversations with dads and daughters, sharing heartfelt stories, actionable advice, and real daughter perspectives that will help you be the best girl dad you can be. Hello, and welcome back to Girl Dad, the podcast. I am your host, Madeline Anderson, and I'm so excited about today's episode. It is another solo episode where I'm going to be going deep into a specific topic, and today's topic is very fun and exciting. It is understanding female hormones. So this is actually a topic that I speak a lot about during fathering conferences or when I'm speaking to men's group. And it's something that gets the most feedback because it's something that I think men just aren't taught ever. And actually, it's something that a lot of women aren't taught either. So it's something that everybody can learn from, and it's a really fascinating topic. So I'm excited to bring it to you today. Okay, so the plan for today is to first talk about the male hormonal cycle, how that differs from the women's hormonal cycle. Then we'll go into the women's cycle, talk about the 4 different phases, and go into detail on each of those phases, kind of how women are feeling during those phases and how you can support them. And then we will talk about birth control and how that affects those phases and what makes it a little bit different. And we'll close out with just a few fun facts that I think are really interesting. All right, so we're going to kick this off talking about the male hormonal cycle. So men have a 24-hour hormonal cycle, which means that every day they feel roughly the same. So at 2 p.m. yesterday, you probably will feel roughly the same as you do at 2 p.m. today, and so on and so forth. And this is because testosterone peaks during the morning, and then it falls throughout the day, rises up at night, and peaks again in the morning, and it continues in that predictable pattern. And so your energy levels, your mood, everything is pretty stable and predictable, just depending on the time of the day. So that is really it for the men for your hormonal cycle. Now, on the other hand, you have the women's hormonal cycle, and that is 28 days on average. This means that a woman can feel different every single day of the 28-day hormonal cycle. And I think right there is already enough for men to understand, okay, wow, this makes sense. Like, why does my wife or my daughter, act a certain way? She's acting different today than she did last week. Well, she probably feels very different today than she did last week because of her hormones and how they are interacting at this present moment. Okay, so there are 4 main phases of the women's hormonal cycle. I'll just do a quick overview of those 4, and then we'll dive deeper into them. The first phase is the menstrual phase, which is her period. And this lasts around 5 to 7 days. So day 1 kicks off the cycle, it goes till around day 5 or day 7. The next phase is the follicular phase, and this is approximately from whenever the period ends, so let's say day 6 to day 14. So this is about 1 week long. Then there's the ovulatory phase, which is ovulation, and that is around day 14. The final phase is the luteal phase, which is approximately 2 weeks, and that would be right after ovulation, so day 14, all the way to day 28. And that concludes the women's cycle. Once she gets her period, it starts over at day 1. All right, so now that you know the 4 phases, let's talk about each one and how women feel during that phase and how you can support your daughter or your wife during that phase. Okay, so phase 1 is the period, the menstrual phase. What's happening hormonally during the period? So this is when progesterone and estrogen start off at their lowest. Them being so low is actually what triggers day 1 of the period. But essentially, when day 1 comes, it starts off with that kind of low energy, crampy, bloating. There might be a backache, other kinds of physical pain associated with it, but it really is the start of a new cycle. And emotionally, your daughter, your wife, any sister, woman in your life, they might have, a lot less energy. They might be a little bit more introverted or reflective. It's really the body's natural time to slow down. So if they're going to the gym, they might feel like they can lift less heavy. That is a physical reaction to just being tired and having lower energy because of the periods. So during this time, how can you support your daughter or your wife? Well, I think awareness is key, right? If you know what's happening and you know she's tired, you can support her by taking things off her plate or just helping her by showing her love or acknowledging that she may be a little bit slower today, maybe a little bit lazier, and that's okay. So sometimes when she has physical pain, something like a heating pad can actually be really effective. So if she's complaining about cramps and you can go microwave a heating pad, I think that would really go a long way and show that you really care. And just, again, not pushing her to force her to be social or, force anything out of her because it really is kind of a very low energy point of the cycle. Okay, so phase 2 is the follicular phase, and this is the best time. Okay, so this is about 1 week, and what's happening hormonally here is estrogen is on the rise. It's building up and it's getting ready for ovulation, which is when the egg is released. So that's phase 3. But this is kind of like, it almost feels like the sun is coming out after a long winter, okay? And physically, what's happening is her energy is starting to climb. Her stamina is improving. She feels smarter, sharper. Her skin clears up. She feels more vibrant. And then emotionally, this is the time where she's the most confident. She's outgoing. She's creative. It's the peak of the cycle when everything just is going well. Okay, so how can you support your women in your life during this phase? Well, I would say that this is the time in which you probably need to support her the least because she's feeling good, as I mentioned. This is more of a time where you can encourage her to do things with you. You can plan a fun, adventurous date, take her out. This is really a good time for most women. So maybe it's a good time for deep conversations and bouncing ideas off one another and motivating each other, hyping each other up. So that is phase 2. Okay, phase 3. This is the ovulatory phase, and this is ovulation. So it's really just centered around the woman releasing the egg. And what's happening hormonally is estrogen is at its highest, and then there's this other hormone called LH that rises to actually release the egg. And this is actually when women are most fertile. And so there's a reason why they feel really good during this time because they are ready to basically be fertilized. Okay, so moving on. This is also when women have really great energy and they actually have higher senses. So like there's studies that show that their eyesight is better, their hearing is better. Like they become little super women, right, during this phase, which is pretty cool. But emotionally, they feel really confident. They feel powerful. Their skin is still really clear. They're really charismatic, and actually they give off a scent that men can pick up on, and they might be more attractive during that time, and vice versa. They can find men more attractive during that time. And again, this really all comes down to biologically the desire for conception. So, pretty interesting. So during this time, how can you support the women in your life? Again, this is a really good time for them. And so it's just more about connection and building your relationship, doing fun things together, planning dates for, again, both your wife, your daughter, and or maybe family dates, right? It's a great time to just be attentive and support them emotionally, but more so just being there with them, spending time together. So this phase, ovulation, is really just like a 1-day thing. And then once the body, the woman's body recognizes whether the egg has been fertilized or not, that's what happens next. So if there is no fertilization that occurs, then she goes into phase 4, which is the luteal phase. So this is the last phase of the cycle, and it lasts around 2 weeks. And what's happening hormonally? Well, a lot of things. And this is not a very fun part of the cycle for women. So estrogen starts to drop, progesterone rises significantly, and that combination tends to lead to really big mood swings, high emotions, sensitivity, PMS, lack of energy, all the fun things. Okay, it's actually a pretty brutal time for most women. And there's things that can help reduce these kinds of negative side effects, including, the way that she eats, but it really is the worst time for most women. And women tend to emotionally feel really critical, really sensitive, really irritable. And it's hard because it's not something that they can control very well because it really is a chemical reaction in the brain. And so these kinds of hormones can just lead to really big mood swings and just feeling kind of icky overall. So this is why, you could maybe say a joke to your wife a week prior and it's super funny. But if you said that same joke during this time, it's incredibly offensive and she won't have it, right? Like there is a very real shift in the way that her brain is operating during this time. And so I think just being aware of that is more important than anything and having some patience. So how you can support her during this time, I would just say patience is super key. And again, you can kind of just ask yourself like, oh, could it be that period of time before the period that she's maybe feeling a little bit off right now? And if you can just realize that maybe it's not you right now, it's just her hormones, she's just in her luteal phase, it can allow you to have some patience to just not take things personally, not add fuel to the fire, maybe asking things like, how can I help you right now? Or do you just want my support? Do you want advice? Those kinds of things, because this is a lot of times where she might cry, she might be extra sensitive to things, and she doesn't actually need you to step up and, solve the problems. More so, she needs you to just hug her and be there for her and let her feel out her emotions. And, so I think this is another time where you can maybe support her with some comfort food or just like hanging out, watching a movie, not a ton of pressure to do things. It is really different for every woman, but this does tend to be a pretty brutal time. That PMS time tends to come about a week before the period and then also right before the period. It's kind of up to you to play detective and figure out what that timing is for your women in your life. But once you understand it, it's really, really helpful context. Again, you can just keep thinking to yourself that it's not you, it's the hormones, and then kind of act accordingly. Okay, so what happens after the luteal phase? Well, at the end of the luteal phase is when both estrogen and progesterone plummet. And that's when the period starts. And so that, again, triggers day 1 of the period, and then you repeat the cycle again. So some main takeaways here are that a woman's cycle on average lasts 28 days, and women feel different each day of those 28 days, but it's broken into 4 distinctive phases. Phase 1 being the period or the menstrual phase, phase 2 being the follicular phase or the phase when your body starts feeling better and rising up. Phase 3 is ovulation. That's when she releases the egg. And then phase 4 is the luteal phase, which is, again, the notorious time for being the worst phase. And then it transitions back into the period with day 1. Okay, so that is the women's hormonal cycle. I hope you learned a lot there. I did want to touch quickly on birth control and how it affects the hormonal cycle, because I do get this question a lot from dads, and I think it is important to share just so that you're aware of what happens with birth control, can help kind of advise on it accordingly. I'm not a doctor, I'm not telling you to do one thing or another, but I think there's a lack of information on what it actually does to the body and how birth control actually affects hormones. Birth control works by mimicking pregnancy in the body. So this means that your body never ovulates. Okay, so in order to do so, birth control has synthetic hormones that mimic the pregnancy, synthetic estrogen, progesterone, and your body thinks it's pregnant. It does not release an egg. There's no ovulation. There's no other phases. So on birth control, these 4 phases do not exist, essentially. And what that does is it prevents these kinds of swings of feelings and moods, and it stabilizes a woman's mood and brain chemistry to a certain extent. You might think, oh, but no, there's a phase of the period, there's a menstrual cycle for women on birth control. Well, it's actually not a real period. So the chemical makeup is completely different. What's happening during that time is her birth control pills are actually sugar pills, which are essentially just a placebo. It's just to ensure that she keeps a habit of taking a pill every day. And so what's happening during that time where she's bleeding, it's not an actual period. It is her body's response to a sudden drop in these synthetic hormones. And so what this means, again, is that these phases do not exist, and she is somewhat stable in terms of her mood throughout the month. However, with that said, when I say stable, I do not mean better necessarily. Like, it's not a situation where these 4 phases are now one phase, and that phase feels like the follicular phase. Like, it's awesome, right? It's the best time of the month, because for a lot of women, their baseline is actually not the best feeling. So they don't actually have that feeling good time of the month. They might be consistently feeling bad throughout the month. They might consistently be emotional throughout the month because of the way that these synthetic hormones affect their body. And this is why a lot of women who are on birth control will bounce around to different brands and different percentages of estrogen, progesterone, etc. And this is really just to figure out which birth control is the best for their body, because for a lot of women, they experience that none of them are good for their body, and they will just take it for the purpose of preventing pregnancy. So I think that's just really important to know, because there are a lot of women who are on birth control, and if you are assuming that they have these 4 phases of their hormonal cycle, it just would not be the case. So it's good to know that it's a completely different experience for birth control than just all natural hormones, but it doesn't mean that you can't show up for people who are on birth control the same way. I mean, if they're experiencing a negative mood, sadness, anxiety, or lack of energy, there are ways that you can show up for them accordingly. Just the same way that you might show up for them when they're on their period or in their luteal phase. That just might happen more frequently throughout the month. So that is the topic of birth control and how it affects the hormonal cycle for women. Lastly, I would love to just close out with some fun facts, because this topic can be not fun for some people, but I think it's really interesting, and I hope that you've learned something from this. One thing that I think is really fun and interesting is that women tend to crave chocolate on their period. So I did some research on this topic to figure out why that is the case, and it's pretty interesting. So it turns out that studies show magnesium levels drop when a woman is on her period. And guess what chocolate has in it? Magnesium, right? So that's why women actually tend to crave chocolate. But I also wanted to tell you this because if you want to show up for your daughter or your wife and you wanted to provide some chocolate, it is very important to decipher between, a Hershey's milk chocolate or Reese's cup and something that actually has magnesium in it, okay? So do her a favor, and if you're gonna give her a little treat like that, maybe go to Whole Foods or another market and get her some organic dark chocolate with cacao in it, and make sure that the ingredients are pure as possible. I really like the Hu brand, HU. I think it's short for human, and there's other great brands out there that are like fair trade organic chocolates. That's a total side note, but again, I just think it's really interesting that women actually crave foods for certain purposes. They might crave steak because of the iron. They lose iron during the period. There's just a lot of science behind why those cravings exist. Okay, fun fact number 2 is that a woman's voice can potentially change during ovulation. It actually might sound higher. I just think that's really interesting. And fun fact number 3 is that studies show that a woman's brain's gray matter and connectivity actually change throughout the cycle, which is why focus and mental energy shift during the different phases. So it is very much a chemical change. And again, just think that's super interesting from a nerdy science perspective, but just thought I would share. Okay, so that concludes our conversation for today. And I just want to let you know that this is not obviously a test for you. This is not something you have to memorize detail for detail. This is just something that I think will help you as a father, as a husband, understand a woman better. And you'll be able to use this conversation as just helpful context into why the women in your life may be feeling a certain way or acting a certain way, and how you can best support them during the different phases. So please let me know what feedback you have. I'm really, really curious about this topic, and I think it's so interesting, and I think that everyone should be more aware of these kinds of things. It's all natural. It's just our bodies, and they're just doing their thing. So the more we can understand them, the better. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I look forward to the next solo deep dive. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in to Girl Dad, the podcast. If you found today's conversation helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow girl dad. I read every review and truly take your words to heart. To close out, remember, your intentional moments make lasting legacies. See you next week.